The Hebrews wended their way through the mountains on a flat surface through most of the canyon. In places the track widened out, but narrowed in others. The mountains offered a little shade, and a tiny stream trickled through the crags. If it rained again, it could fill with water. The sky provided glimpses of cumulus clouds forming towards the east. "No sign of Pharaoh yet," said Aaron, not for the first time. "We could easily defeat the army," said Moses. "Their forces were heavily depleted." "If we had any fight in us," said Aaron. "You can't imagine what it was like." Was there resentment in his voice? "I wished you could have been freed sooner," said Moses, feeling guilty without cause. Aaron shook his head. "God said 400 years, and he meant it." Moses smiled. "You know how I longed to see you and the family. You might think this is strange, but I was actually sad to see the soldiers die of the plagues, men whose fathers I had trained." They walked in silence for a time. "At least Pharaoh's navy are still at sea, praise God," said Moses. Tziphrah had joined them. "What is a navy?" "Soldiers on ships," answered Aaron. She screwed up her nose. "How many of these soldiers are coming to kill us, Moses?" she asked. "None will kill us," declared Moses with some warmth. The people around them heard him raise his voice. Seeing this, he said in equal volume, "God brought his people out of Egypt to save them, not to destroy them." There were encouraging responses from the people. "The chariotry and infantry numbered 119,000 before you came," said an Egyptian voice behind them. It was Hippoware. "Where on earth are we going?" he asked. "We will make camp at the mouth of the gorges on the beach," said Moses. "How many soldiers are left exactly?" "What do you want?" interrupted Aaron. Hippoware backed away with his hands up. "I wanted that information," said Moses to Aaron. Manasseh and Seneb-Tsisi walked with Hippoware. "They'll get used to you, Hippo," teased Seneb-Tsisi. "Our master was a good man. We liked him," she said. "He gifted us generously when we left," added Manasseh. "I'm not surprised," said Hippoware. He began to feel more comfortable with the Hebrews. They were frank and felt free to discuss things openly, unlike the servants in the court whose speech had been heavily restricted. "You're not jealous, are you, Sakar?" asked her mother as they followed close behind. "Well, he might be fickle," said Sakar. "Asher and I will find you a good Jewish husband, and Royanet too." Royanet rode in a cart further back in the crowd. A midwife was attending her. The exertion of the journey had been too much for her, and she was bleeding heavily, to her great embarrassment. But she was happy enough otherwise. She told the midwife how she despised all men because of Kosei. The woman understood, but encouraged her that one day she may feel differently. Eventually the mountains opened out at the beach, revealing a vast expanse of sand. The Hebrews spread out and made camp. Jabari had been feeling that his life was in danger, as Pharaoh's behaviour had been becoming more erratic. So it was that Jabari sat in his chamber, greatly relieved to hear the departure of Pharaoh and his army. Hooves thundered, horns blared, men shouted, and as the sound faded away, Jabari's tension eased. He wondered how the army would fare. Out of 100,000 troops, only a small percentage remained to slay or capture the Hebrews. 1,200 soldiers with 600 chariots, choice though they were, both man and animal, had been weakened and their morale was low. Jabari believed that Egypt was finished. The Assyrians would no doubt hear of this and prepare for revenge. Jabari gathered some of his belongings and set off on a horse, which he stole from Pharaoh's stable. Among his possessions was Hippowe's papyrus, which he considered to be excellent prose and worth keeping. It needed an ending, which he would later finish himself. He didn't know where he was going, but definitely out of Egypt. Maybe he would even find his friend somewhere along the way. In the twilight, fires sprang up among the tents on the beach, and as the Hebrews prepared for a meal, there would be much singing tonight. Wine had been bought at the villages and was being poured into earthen vessels under the moonlight. Gentle waves lapped the shore. During the night it rained and the wind was gusty. Moses lay in his tent that night feeling troubled, as the rain poured heavily enough to drip through the tent. How would things be handled if Pharaoh's army arrived? He estimated how long they might wait until coming after them. They must be closing in by now. The rain cleared up in the early hours. Before dawn, Moses walked to the mountain pass and listened. He placed his ear to the stone, but could hear nothing. He then walked towards the south and north to see if there could be any access to the beach from there. He passed Siphrah on the way and explained his errand. "Be careful," she said, and went to prepare breakfast for the children and the braying donkey. Moses stood at the most northern easterly part of the beach where it broadened out. He peered into the distance. The coastline was rocky with a narrow gravel shoreline, some of which would probably be underwater at high tide. He relaxed a little and headed further north away from the people. Once clear of the Hebrews, he knelt on the sand, facing the sea, and prayed with his arms raised. One of the things God said to him was, "The Egyptians will know who I am when I gain honor over them." He also told Moses that he would serve God at Mount Horeb, where God had spoken with him from the burning bush. With peace in his heart, Moses returned to his family. As he was walking, it occurred to him that this sea had no Hebrew name. Now that the Israelites were there, he thought it would be appropriate. He'd give it some thought when he had more time. On returning, he saw the flocks and herds lapping from the stream of rainwater in the mountain pass. That could be a real problem soon, he thought. Also, the pillar of fire could act as a beacon to the pursuing Egyptians. The day passed uneventfully. The only concern talked of was whether they were going to travel north up the coast to return to the road. In answer, Moses said, "I'll make an announcement when the time is right." They assumed that a few days' rest at the beach would be a much-needed recreation. The people swam in the sea and enjoyed themselves. They got to know the other families they were travelling with. On the 5th day, they were wondering why they were delaying. Then, about 4 in the afternoon, a cry broke out at the mountain pass. The shepherds could hear the chariotry navigating the pass, the sound echoing among the rocks. The Hebrews passed the message on quickly throughout the camp that their enemies were coming. "So, Pharaoh thinks we are trapped, just as God told me," Moses said to Aaron. "We are trapped," said Aaron. The Hebrews began panicking to bundle up their belongings and find loved ones. In their hurry, they forgot about God. Many of them surrounded Moses in an angry mob. He called for 2 lads to scout into the hills around the pass. Meanwhile, the pillar of cloud moved to block the mouth of the gorges, a massive pillar as a shield for the Hebrews. This was a wonder that brought comfort, and their fears subsided. Pharaoh's army had galloped with few breaks, and both man and beast were exhausted. They rested in a column along the mountain pass, as thick smoke from God's presence blew in on them from an east wind. The 2 Hebrew scouts smiled at each other, seeing that the Egyptians were on the losing side. They clearly heard the Egyptians' voices echoing up the rocky crags. "God fights for the Hebrews against us," they were saying. Pharaoh did nothing to silence them. He secretly agreed, and he also had a feeling that this had happened before. He looked up at the slopes of the mountains through the smoke. He sent 2 soldiers up to spy out the Hebrews. "God is on our side," said one of the Hebrew scouts. "Let's go back now." They hurried back to Moses. "There can't be many more than 500 to 600 chariots," they told him, "and their will is weak." Pharaoh saw that the climb up the slope wasn't too difficult, and he decided to head aloft for a better vantage point of the coming battle. He went alone, after leaving instructions with his 2 generals.